Mubarak swept from power. I will now read from the Financial Times for speed. This is by Raoul Cafe and Hiba Shelley in Cairo. An overwhelming wave of popular protests swept Hosni Mubarak from office on Friday night, forcing Egypt's veteran president to hand over power to the army. In a second Arab revolution within a month, after millions of Egyptians have flooded onto the streets to demand Mubarak's immediate removal, Omar Suleiman, the newly appointed vice president, made a brief evening television appearance to tell the nation that the president had resigned and the military was now in charge. Mr. Mubarak had already fled Cairo for his own residence in the Red Sea resort Sharm el-Sheikh. Tahrir Square, the nerve centre of the 18-day revolt, erupted in frenzied chants of "He gave up, he gave up," and drivers sounded horns around Cairo as the Arab world's most popular country bid a noisy farewell to 30 years of Mubarak's rule. The president exit in the face of youth-led uprising that drew more and more protesters within every concession the regime made, came exactly 4 weeks after Tunisia's Zen Ali Abidine Ben Ali was removed by a popular uprising. In an Arab world where the people have suddenly discovered their power to overthrow the status quo, the downfall of the leader of Egypt is certain to shake Mr. Mubarak's autocratic friends and inspire their populations. Mubarak, by the way, has £70 billion worth of Egypt's money, so they probably want that back. They probably want to try him as well. That's Infokemp's personal opinion. The article continues. Egypt will be heaven in 10 years, declared Wael Gomeni, the Google executive who has emerged as a leading symbol of the youth revolution. Barack Obama, US President, said the people of Egypt have spoken, their voices have been heard, and Egypt will never be the same. Opposition leaders said military rule will be unacceptable. We are in the early phases still. No doubt the fall of this hateful regime is a cause for joy, but we hope for the next steps will we go into a satisfactory way, said Rashid Bayoumin, deputy leader of the Muslim Brotherhood, the Islamist opposition. Unlike Tunisia, however, the military, the only institution still respected by the people, has stepped out of the shadows in direct rule for the first time since 1952. But expectation in Tahrir Square, one of Egypt's invigorating youth movement appears to be ready to fight on, is that the army's role will be to manage the transition to democratic rule rather than take over for good. Appearing on television, an army spokesman said the High Command would later announce measures to introduce the changes the Egyptians wanted. He saluted the martyrs who had sacrificed their lives for the freedom of their country and thanked Mubarak for his long service. Mubarak surrendered in the face of an astounding rejection of his move on Thursday to hand responsibility to Mr. Suleiman, but remained as a figurehead president. The people have overcome. We have prevailed. We have won. By Andrew England in Cairo. It was evening prayer time and Tahrir Square, centre of the protests against Hosni Mubarak, was quiet after yet another day of exuberant and defiant demonstrations calling for the president to step down. Then, without warning, sections of the crowd erupted with wild cheers, fists pumping, men and women leaping into the air to celebrate, others startled. What was in the news that had triggered such excitement? They reached for their phones to try and understand what was going on. And as the message that Mr. Mubarak had finally stepped down swept through hundreds of thousands of people massed together, the entire square exploded in jubilant cacophony. I cannot get a grip of myself. It is overwhelming. It is beyond my ability to describe, but I am proud to be an Egyptian. Karim Arafat, tears welled in his eyes. The people have overcome. We have prevailed. We have won. all around, chants of Allah Akbar or God is great ran out, while some dropped to their knees, faced Mecca and prayed. Few seemed concerned that the military was taken over, and many insisted that they would not give up their campaign until a civilian democratic government was in place. We will still remain in our positions for the transition. We will need to make sure that the rule comes back to the people, not to the military, said Mahmoud Makalur, a doctor. As soon as the celebration mirrored across much of the Arab world, dominated, hundreds of thousands of people poured into the streets as joy erupted across Egypt. Men lined up among soldiers to have their pictures taken, while children gleefully clambered over the tanks to be embraced by the troops. It's just great. We are building a new history for the modern Egypt, said Sharif Selet, a mechanical engineer draped in the Egyptian flag. As a cradle of civilization, Egypt is going to retain its place and respect and its position in the world according to the potential of its people. As the evening drew into night, more people poured into the square to join the celebrations. Others marched out of the town, chanting, cheering and waving their flags as roads and bridges overflowed with people. Some turned their thoughts to the future and the challenges that lie ahead for the country that has known nothing but autocratic rule for decades and which is blighted by gaping inequalities. In fact, the Egyptians in their 5,000 to 7,000 year history have never had democracy. More than 40% of the population lives in poverty. It is the first day of our lives. We've started to rebuild it all. Now it starts, said Boutros, a jubilant protester. The real revolution will be when everyone's home, the schools, the offices we have to reconstruct. He said he was mindful of the challenges, but he added, we built the pyramids. Today is the fourth pyramid. So the question is now, given that Mubarak was so solidly in control, how will this affect the rest of the Arab world? Will we see a dynamo effect, a toppling of regimes across the board, democracy sweeping through the Arabian Peninsula into Saudi Arabia? Will we see the downfall caused not by the Western intervention, but the downfall of the Bin Laden Saudi crime families by their own people? Will their own people seek democracy? Can the Saudi Arabians, who've had since 1945 have been brainwashed into fundamentalist Islam, embrace democracy as the Egyptians have done? A different society, but the two countries are still the linchpin of the Arab world, and they are neighbours as well. It will be interesting to see how the Saudis can keep a grip, or will the tide of democracy sweep them away into the mists of history as they should rightfully do. Let's hope it's not a pink mist of people being shot in the streets by the Saudi army. But let's see the people embrace the Saudi army and remove their dictator, the Saudi royal family and the Bin Laden crime families in Saudi Arabia. That would be my best wish for them. But overall, we can see that the Arab world is changing. People are starting to find their voice. And what I would like is a secular, constitutional monarchies in Arabia with a democratic parliamentary system modelled on the Westminster system of Great Britain. This would be the key, and the way that the Egyptians, being the power, might spread democracy themselves. Perhaps even militarily they might spread democracy. They would certainly have the means. You saw plenty of Abraham's main battle tanks on the streets, and they have a vast 80 million population. If anything, Egypt is the Germany of the Arab world. It is the dynamo of the Arab world. They have their own industries and they have good exports, but it's still a very poor country. Let's hope democracy brings them riches as well as good fortune. Thank you for listening.